The school sat like a weary sentinel at the edge of the village, its paint peeling in long strips that fluttered when the wind blew. The sound of the river was never far, its muddy voice seeped through the air, carrying the scents of fish and mangrove roots. Mariama had grown used to the setting, the squeak of chalk against the old blackboard, the rustle of students hurrying out when the bell rang, the silence that followed. Yet today, as she straightened the stack of exercise books on her desk, her heart beat faster. She was waiting for Lamin. Mariama was 16 and carried herself with the quiet authority of someone who already knew what she wanted. She dreamed of becoming a teacher, not just for her village but for any child who feared they were too small for their own dreams. Lamin was one of those children, or rather one of those almost men, because at 17 he was tall, strong, and already working alongside his father on the river. But in the classroom he seemed smaller, hesitant, as though each word in English weighed more than the nets he dragged at dawn. When Lamin appeared in the doorway, he hesitated, leaning on the frame as though unsure he should enter. His hair curled tight against his head, his skin darkened by hours under the sun. He smelled faintly of salt and wood smoke, the perfume of fishermen. Mariama waved him in with a smile, and he shuffled forward, his bare feet whispering against the concrete floor. "Sit," she said, pointing to the desk near the window. Outside, the mango tree leaned its branches toward them, sunlight dripping between the leaves. She opened the grammar book. "We'll start with verbs." She wrote on the blackboard, "throw, threw, thrown." "Repeat," she said. Lamin's voice was low, hesitant. "Throw, threw, thrown." She nodded, encouraging him. "Again." He repeated them, his confidence growing, and she crafted sentences that matched his world. "We throw the net at dawn. Yesterday we threw it into the water. By evening the fish were thrown into baskets." Lamin chuckled at the sound of his life turned into lessons. For Mariama the small victory was enough. She could see his shoulders straighten, the burden of doubt slipping for a moment. She leaned forward, eyes bright. "English is like a river," she said softly. "If you learn its current it will carry you places." Lamin looked away, out toward the real river, where his father's boat would soon return. He didn't tell her that another current already tugged at him, one stronger, darker, and secret. Inside his shirt, folded carefully, lay a letter from Banjul. A letter that whispered of Spain, of money, of a future his family depended on. It pressed against his chest like a stone. Mariama closed the lesson by praising his effort, unaware of the storm behind his quiet eyes. To her, Lamin was a boy learning to speak another language. To Lamin, she was something far more dangerous, a reason to hesitate when opportunity demanded speed. That evening, when Mariama walked home with her satchel bouncing against her hip, she replayed his smile in her mind. She thought it was the smile of a boy proud of himself. But Lamin knew better. It was the smile of someone who carried a secret too heavy for his years. The mornings in Lamin's compound began before sunrise. The sky, still bruised with night, glowed faintly at the horizon. Lamin's father woke him with a sharp tap to the shoulder. "Up," he muttered. Lamin rolled from his mat, splashed water on his face from a tin basin, and followed his father down to the riverbank. The pirogue waited, its paint chipped, nets coiled in the bow. Lamin pushed it into the water, the wood groaning under their weight. His father started the engine with a cough and a prayer. Out on the river, the mist clung low, and pelicans shuffled like judges on the sandbars. Lamin worked silently, his muscles remembering the rhythm. Cast the net, wait, haul it back. By the time the sun stretched high, his palms were already raw. Later, when he walked into the classroom, Mariama pinched her nose playfully. "You've brought the whole river with you," she teased. Lamin smiled faintly, embarrassed but warmed. It was rare that anyone his age spoke to him with such kindness. She began the lesson with energy, her chalk sketching a rough drawing of a fishing net on the board. Beneath it she wrote, "Catch, caught, caught." She turned, eyes alight. "Your world can be written in English, Lamin. Let's try." They formed sentences together. "We catch fish every morning. Yesterday we caught many bonga. By noon the nets were caught in the mangroves." Lamin repeated after her, stumbling but improving. His laughter surprised even him when he mispronounced a word. Mariama joined in, their shared amusement filling the classroom. At break, she offered him roasted groundnuts wrapped in old newspaper. They ate quietly, shells cracking between their fingers. Lamin asked, "Why do you care about teaching me?" "There are others." Mariama tilted her head, her scarf slipping slightly. "Because you can learn. Because words can carry you farther than boats, Lamin." The sentence lingered, and Lamin thought of the letter pressed under his shirt. The cousin in Banjul had written that a recruiter was waiting, that Spain held promise of money and stability. The words were heavy, full of temptation and fear. Mariama's voice, though, pulled him in another direction, one that spoke not of survival but of belonging. When the lesson ended, Lamin lingered, staring at the chalk marks on the board as though they held an answer. Mariama noticed but said nothing. She simply smiled, gathered her books and wished him well. Lamin walked home, his heart caught between two worlds, one made of nets and hunger, the other of verbs and a girl's unwavering faith. The letter had arrived like contraband, delivered by a boy with quick eyes who had traveled from Banjul. Lamin's cousin had written in hurried Wolof, telling of opportunities on Spanish trawlers. The job was hard, the hours long, but the pay was more than anyone in Lamin's village could dream of. Enough to buy rice for years, to repair the family compound, to pay school fees for his sisters. The words burned in Lamin's chest. At night, he lit a candle stub and reread the letter until the words blurred. He imagined himself on a massive steel ship, the sea stretching endless and merciless. He imagined money folded neatly into his palm, his father proud, his mother relieved. Yet each time Mariama's face intruded, the way her eyes sparked when he answered correctly, the softness of her laugh when he stumbled. During lessons, the letter seemed to pulse against his skin. Mariama noticed his distraction. "You're far away today," she said once, when he fumbled over a simple passage. Her hand brushed his arm gently. "Is it the river again?" "Yes," Lamin lied, the word tasting bitter. He could not bring himself to tell her. To speak the letter aloud would make it real, would force him to admit that he might leave. Mariama recorded his progress each evening in her small ledger. She wrote, Lamin distracted. Something heavy in his mind. She thought perhaps it was exhaustion from fishing, but the thought gnawed at her. She wanted to ask, to insist, but she had learned that Lamin was like the river itself, sometimes shallow, sometimes deep, never revealing all at once. Lamin meanwhile lived in two worlds. In one he was the dutiful son, hauling nets, mending ropes, preparing to follow his father's life. In the other he was the student, stumbling but learning, guided by Mariama's steady patience. The letter threatened to tear those worlds apart. That night, as he lay under the mosquito net, he pressed the folded paper to his chest. The choice loomed like a storm on the horizon, to chase survival across unknown seas, or to stay and risk drowning in poverty, but with Mariama by his side. The market was alive with sound. Drummers tested their rhythms on overturned buckets, hawkers sang out prices for cassava, and children darted between stalls with coins clutched tight. Mariama's mother was at her usual spot, bent over a steaming pot of bennekin, the aroma of rice, fish and vegetables rising into the air. Mariama stood beside her, scooping portions into enamel bowls for waiting customers. Every dalasi earned was counted, every coin a step closer to Mariama's dream. When the last plate was sold, Mariama tucked away her small share of the profits and returned home. She pulled a glass jar from under her bed, its label carefully written in blue ink, College Fund. The jar clinked as she dropped the coins inside. It was still pitifully light, but it was hope contained in glass. She smoothed the label with her fingertips, whispering to herself, "One day." After dinner, she opened her ledger, the notebook where she recorded everything from tutoring notes to private reflections. She wrote in neat script, Lamin read a full page today. Stumbled on though, and through. Asked why English steals letters it doesn't need. Smiled twice. Laughed once. She underlined laughed twice, then shut the book quickly, cheeks burning. Yet her thoughts lingered on Lamin's silences. There was something restless in his eyes, as if he carried more than fatigue from fishing. She wondered if his family was struggling more than most, or if perhaps he didn't believe learning could truly change anything. Mariama wanted to reach across the invisible wall he built around himself, but she knew trust had to be earned like coins in her jar, patiently, one by one. Meanwhile, Lamin sat on the other side of the village, crouched by the river, letter in hand. He read it again, lips moving silently. His father called from the compound, "Don't let the lantern burn all the oil." Lamin folded the paper carefully, tucking it back under his shirt. He thought of Mariama's words, English is a river, and wondered whether this foreign current she spoke of could be as strong as the one dragging him towards Spain. The essay was simple, a day on the river. Mariama asked Lamin to write about something he knew well. Lamin bent over the desk, gripping the pencil like an oar. His letters were crooked, uncertain, but the sentences came. He wrote of dawn mist, of nets hissing through the air, of fish that flashed like silver coins in the sunlight. When he read it aloud, Mariama closed her eyes, transported by his imagery. She corrected his grammar lightly, circling errors with care. "You see," she said. "You already know how to write, you just need to learn how to dress your thoughts in English." Lamin chuckled, shaking his head. "My thoughts don't like clothes." "They will," she teased. "I'll sew them for you." That afternoon the classroom became something more than wood and chalk. It was a boat, carrying two unlikely passengers across a river of words. Mariama saw Lamin's confidence grow with each corrected line. For the first time he believed he might belong in this world of books, not just in boats of wood and salt. But when he left, the weight of the letter returned. He slipped it from his shirt, unfolding it again as he walked home. The words promised escape, money, survival. Yet in Mariama's classroom for a few hours, he had felt another kind of possibility. One where he was more than a fisherman's son, more than cheap labor for a foreign sea. The conflict gnawed at him, sharper each day. The village festival arrived with the new moon. Drummers beat rhythms that shook dust from the ground, women wore bright wax prints, and children smeared with chalk danced barefoot in circles. The air smelled of roasted peanuts and fried akara. For once, everyone seemed to forget hunger, debt, and hardship. Mariama's friends tugged her to the dancing circle, but her eyes sought Lamin, who stood near the fishing boats with his friends. He wore a crisp white shirt, borrowed from his uncle, and his usual shyness seemed replaced with quiet pride. When their eyes met, Mariama's pulse quickened. She lifted her chin, daring him to join the dance. To her surprise he stepped forward. The circle parted, and Lamin moved with a rhythm born of rowing and casting nets. His feet were awkward at first, but the crowd cheered and Mariama joined him. They laughed together, sweat shining on their faces, their movements clumsy yet joyous. For those moments the weight Lamin carried vanished. But later that night, under the moonlight, he found himself alone by the river. He pulled out the letter, reading it once more by the glow of a lantern. The paper seemed heavier than ever. Spain. Survival. Opportunity. Yet his heart replayed Mariama's laughter in the dance circle. How could he choose? The days after the festival carried a new current between them. Mariama noticed how Lamin's eyes lingered longer, how he laughed more easily in lessons. She found herself anticipating their time together, scribbling new exercises late into the night. But Lamin's silence deepened in private. His father spoke often now of debts, of nets too old to hold their weight. "If only we had money for a motor that didn't fail," his father muttered. Lamin knew the overseas job could fix everything in 1 year. 1 year away from home, away from Mariama. One afternoon, Mariama asked him to write an essay titled My Dream. Lamin hesitated, pencil hovering. He thought of Spain, of ships, of euros. But when he began to write, another dream surfaced. A life where he could read, write, and speak freely, where he was more than a fisherman's shadow. He wrote of wanting to stand in a classroom not as a student but as a man who had something to teach. When he read it aloud, Mariama's eyes glistened. She applauded softly, pride swelling in her chest. Lamin smiled, but guilt struck him hard. He had not told her that his father expected him to leave within months. His dream on paper and his reality were drifting farther apart. The heat was merciless that day. The tin roof of the classroom rattled and the blackboard shimmered faintly. Mariama wiped sweat from her brow as she explained conditional tenses. Lamin's concentration faltered. Finally he dropped his pencil with a thud. "Mariama," he said, voice strained, "what if you had a chance to leave? To go somewhere far away where life is easier, but you had to leave everything here behind." She frowned, taken aback. "I don't know," she admitted. "I think I would stay. My roots are here. My family. My students. Dreams don't always need to be far away." Lamin swallowed hard, staring at the chalk dust drifting through the air. He wanted to tell her about the letter, about Spain. But her answer tightened his chest. To her, staying was strength. To him, leaving felt like survival. That night, Mariama wrote in her ledger. "He asked me about leaving. What? Something is pulling him away. I'm afraid." One morning the river turned violent. Storm clouds gathered, and Lamin and his father fought waves that threatened to swallow their boat. The nets tore, fish escaped, and by the time they returned, soaked to the bone, they had caught almost nothing. His father sat on the sand, face lined with defeat. "We cannot live like this, Lamin. We need more. If you have a chance," he trailed off, staring at the horizon where the sea met the sky. Lamin's throat tightened. His father knew of the letter and silently approved. Later, Lamin arrived late to tutoring, hands blistered, eyes haunted. Mariama noticed at once but said nothing. She guided him gently through the lesson, her voice steady, like an anchor in his storm. He wanted to tell her then, but the words refused. Instead, he read aloud the sentences she gave him, his voice trembling. I am here. I am leaving. I am lost. Word traveled fast in the village. Someone had overheard Lamin's father speaking about Spain, and whispers began to spread. Mariama first heard it in the market. 2 women at a vegetable stall clucked their tongues. The fisherman's son is leaving. The sea will swallow him or Europe will. Mariama froze, her basket heavy in her arms. Her heart pounded. Was it true? She hurried home, anger and fear twisting inside her. That afternoon, when Lamin arrived, she confronted him. Is it true? She demanded, eyes flashing. Are you leaving? Lamin froze, guilt written across his face. He opened his mouth but no words came. Mariama's eyes filled with tears. She turned away, unable to look at him. The letter had spoken at last, without him uttering a word. The days that followed were heavy with silence. Lamin still came to lessons, but Mariama's warmth had cooled. She taught with mechanical precision, avoiding his gaze. He answered stiffly, ashamed. The classroom, once alive with laughter, felt like a cage. At night, Lamin lay awake, torn between duty and desire. His father reminded him daily of debts, of opportunities slipping away. Mariama's silence was worse than any storm. He wished she would shout, argue, anything but this aching quiet. Finally, one evening as the sun bled into the horizon, he whispered into the darkness, I don't want to leave her. But I must. Preparations began quietly. Lamin's cousin in Banjul sent instructions. There would be a bus, a meeting point, papers to sign. Lamin felt as if each detail carved a piece from his chest. Mariama noticed the change. His distracted glances, his restless hands. One afternoon, she broke her silence. When? She asked, voice trembling. Soon, he admitted. The word shattered something fragile between them. Mariama closed her book, unable to continue. That night, she added no entry to her ledger. The page remained blank, a silence on paper. The mango tree had been their witness for months. Now, beneath its shade, they faced each other. Lamin held the letter, crumpled from being folded too many times. Mariama's eyes locked on it. Why didn't you tell me? She asked. I was afraid, he whispered. Afraid of me or of choosing? He had no answer. The river roared softly in the distance, indifferent to their pain. Mariama's tears fell onto the roots of the tree. Lamin reached for her hand, but she pulled away. If you go, Lamin, don't expect me to wait forever. The night before his departure, Lamin could not sleep. His mother prayed quietly in the corner, his father sharpened a knife by the fire. Lamin stepped outside, staring at the stars. Each one seemed like a possibility, far yet unreachable. He thought of Mariama, alone in her room, perhaps writing in her ledger, perhaps hating him. He longed to see her one last time. But shame pinned him in place. He returned to his mat, clutching the letter. The bus would come at dawn. The bus rattled at the edge of the village, headlights cutting through the early mist. Lamin's cousin waved urgently. Come. Lamin stood with his bag, heart pounding. His father's eyes urged him forward, but his feet felt anchored. He looked back at the school, at the mango tree, at the river. He thought of Mariama's laughter, her faith, her words. English is a river. He dropped the bag. The cousin shouted. His father cursed. But Lamin turned and ran toward the school, toward the classroom where he hoped Mariama was waiting. When he burst inside, breathless, she was there, arranging books. Her eyes widened in shock. You came back. I couldn't leave, he said simply, chest heaving. Mariama's tears spilled, but this time they were mixed with relief. She touched his hand, and for the first time neither of them pulled away. Outside, the bus rumbled away, carrying other boys into uncertain seas. But Lamin stayed. He had chosen love, chosen learning, chosen a future still fragile but rooted in hope. The river flowed on, eternal, but for Lamin and Mariama, a new current had begun, one made not of nets or letters from abroad, but of words, laughter, and the promise of tomorrow.